Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we are at Victory Hill and we're going to interview Laurie. Laurie is an equine specialist in mental health and learning, and as we've done before, you guys already know that I'm a therapist, and I really like the idea of sharing how other professions and professionals really do help with mental health. So Laurie, thanks for being on the channel. And the first thing that we're going to do is just ask you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thank you, Michael. So I am Laurie Bryceland. I'm the Executive Director of Victory Hill Therapeutic Horsemanship, and I'm also an equine specialist in mental health and learning and a certified therapeutic riding instructor through PATH International. I've been the Executive Director of Victory Hill since we opened in May of 2020. That's right, in the height of the pandemic. We decided to open and provide services that everyone had lost because everywhere else was shutting down.
Absolutely. So of course, someone Googles, I don't know if people Google like equine therapy. We were having this conversation. It's like, what is it? Horse health? No, I forgot what it was.
A lot of people say horse therapy.
Horse therapy, there you go, right? Horse therapy.
But the technical term,
yes.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Is equine assisted services.
Equine assisted services.
Nobody seems to really know except those of us who are in the industry.
Exactly. So what is an equine specialist? And then what is it? The mental health and learning is a specific section of people that do this kind of work.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, those of us in the industry call it ESMHL certification.
Yes.
Those are the letters that go after my name. So basically, as an equine specialist in mental health and learning, of course, I specialize in horse behavior and how horse and human behavior affect each other, and how interacting with the horse can promote your mental health.
Absolutely. In other interviews I've done, it's been like there's been a little bit of a break between a person's profession that's not technically doing therapeutic or therapy, but in this case, in this profession, to the degree that we're actually working with other people for building mental, emotional, physical resiliency. And it is not just therapeutic, it's actually a form of therapy, right? Yep. So what kind of problems, if I kind of say that, what kind of problems do you help people overcome with equine therapy?
Right, that's a great question. So, and just to clarify some of the terminology and what it all means and why my profession is different than your profession.
Yes.
Right? Because you are a New York State licensed therapist.
Right. So
you can provide quote unquote therapy.
Right.
When I refer to the services that I provide, it needs to be therapeutic.
Yes.
Because I'm not considered a mental health professional. I am more of a trauma-informed practitioner of horsemanship.
Nice.
Right. So that's kind of the difference. So what was the other part of the question?
Well, yeah. So like if I go on your website, you'll see that there's like services that we offer. What are all these different services that we offer?
Yep. So the services that we offer just at Victory Hill, or in what you and I do together?
All the services that we offer at Victory Hill, and then we'll start kind of taking out the ones that we want to do a deeper dive.
Yep. Great. So there's a lot. There's a wide variety of services that we perform here at Victory Hill. Probably the most well-known service in equine assisted services would be therapeutic riding, and that can be for children or adults to overcome a variety of challenges, whether those are developmental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities, or mental health challenges. The list kind of goes on how we can help you through riding. But then there's also groundwork programs where there is no riding at all. So some of those are called equine assisted learning. I can perform that service on my own without a mental health professional present. Then we have equine assisted psychotherapy, where we do pull Michael into the session, and he provides extra mental health support, and that allows us to dive a little bit deeper into some mental health challenges that might be caused by a past trauma or early childhood experiences. My role is to deal more with what's happening with you right now. So stress reduction, anxiety, depression, teach you skills for dealing with those challenges in your life and overcoming those challenges. So I can deal with what's happening with you right now in your life. Michael can help you dive a little deeper and offer extra support if that's necessary for your recovery.
Right.
So then we also offer hippotherapy, which is also done on horseback with a different type of therapist. That would be with an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. And that's for usually young children ages 2 to about 7, although we have some older children. Also, there's different reasons why you would qualify for hippotherapy. Then we also have a program called Stable Moments, which is specifically designed for children and young adults who've spent time in the foster care system. So they could be currently adopted, they could be in a kinship foster situation, but it's for children and young adults who have spent time away from their biological family, because we know that in every situation across the board, they have incurred some type of early childhood trauma.
Right.
So that affects their brain function, and it affects their ability to live healthy adult lives one day, or even well-functioning lives as a child. So we help them work through the effects of that early childhood trauma and reverse the effects so that they can just function at a higher quality of brain function and mood regulation and all the different things that we work on with them. I think I hit the highlights. Of course, Horses for Heroes, right?
I was just gonna say, wait.
That's a huge one. Horses for Heroes. Well, it's funny because Horses for Heroes is kind of an umbrella term, and under that falls equine assisted services or equine assisted psychotherapy or therapeutic riding. Right. So Horses for Heroes, though, is a specific program that we've designed for our veterans, first responders, reservists, active military, and their families.
Exactly. Yes.
Because we know with those job titles comes a lot of stress, high burnout rates, a lot of anxiety, depression, post-combat stress, all kinds of challenges that you might face, even if you were never deployed, but we know just from going through combat training, it changes the way you think, and it changes the way you view the world, and it changes the way you process stress and relationships and all of that. So we do help you to overcome some of those challenges.
So a lot of times when we're, so if I'm doing therapy and someone comes in, I'll get someone that basically says, hey, I've never done this before, and we already know that there's usually a pretty, let's just say, I think it's lessening now, but there's a stigma still around mental health. And when we start talking about the Horses for Heroes program and that community, veteran community, first responder community, there is what's the word that I like to use? There is almost like a different kind of stigma called it's actually labeled the character weakness model. So people that do therapy or go to therapy or seek mental health services, they have this unspoken character weakness model, right? Except that it's when I talk about it, it's really no different than just training, right? You're just training yourself. Like when we go to the gym, you want to achieve some kind of physical health, and then a lot of times therapy or therapeutic services is to achieve more mental, emotional health, right? So I have to guide or explain to people how the process works for me when we're in our therapy setting. How does it work, right? Like how do we want to unpack how equine therapy works? How does it help people?
Okay, that's a really loaded question. So how much time does everybody have? I will try to keep it as brief as I can. So we perform equine assisted services here at Victory Hill in our Horses for Heroes program, because it will be different at different programs and different locations. But here, through my training, we provide what we call a trauma-informed practice, right? So I'm well educated and well practiced at helping understanding how trauma affects brain function and healthy living. And so what we do is we take a look at that brain function. We make sure that you're educated, that the client is educated on you know, it's those invisible wounds, right?
Right.
So even though you can't physically see that your brain has changed the way it functions, it has. So first thing we do is educate you on how the trauma has affected your brain. And then we work on repairing it, right? So it's no different than any other physical injury. It's just invisible because it's inside your brain, right? So I think understanding the changes that have occurred and understanding how we're going to reverse them, and that you have control over this and you're an active participant in the healing process. Right. This is not some kind of crazy voodoo. It's actually science. It's biology. It's changing the way your brain functions.
Exactly.
So I think helping a client to understand all of that, I see the relief on their faces.
Yes. I
see when we explain it in very simple terms and they kind of just breathe this big sigh of relief and they go, oh, no wonder that I've been experiencing these symptoms or these challenges. It now makes perfect sense. Because so often in a clinical setting, they don't get that explanation, right? They don't often understand why they're experiencing what they're experiencing. So that's step number one, is we explain the why. And then we cover the how we're going to repair it, and how the horses are going to do that, right? And that's the amazing piece. So in a nutshell, I can tell you that horses are, you know, why horses? Horses are completely non-judgmental, okay? They're prey animals because they have a brain that is always worried about their environment, always worried about danger, because as large as they are prey, right? So what we know is that a horse's brain functions exactly the same as someone who has experienced trauma. Basically, they live in their brainstem, fight or flight, a hypervigilance of their surroundings and whoever's in their environment. So a horse completely understands someone who has experienced trauma and how their brain works. So there is no one better to give you instant biofeedback on how you're doing. You know, are you feeling anxious today? Because sometimes when a client walks into the barn, okay, particularly a veteran or a first responder, they're so excellent at masking their emotions. They've basically been trained to do that. Push it down, push it down, push it down. I'm fine, I'm great, the world is wonderful, right? When inside, there's a lot of turmoil. The brain is constantly spinning and churning the stress, and they just can't shut it off. They don't know how to shut it off. So when we go out to work with the horses, the horse will immediately let me know if what I'm seeing on the outside is not matching what's happening on the inside. Okay, people often ask me, how are horses different than dogs? Why horses? Why isn't a service dog good enough? And so service dogs are wonderful. They're going to love you unconditionally. They're going to provide companionship and unconditional love, and that's super important when you're recovering from trauma, and it's great for your mental health. But what a dog can't do is help you understand your current emotional state and how to fix it. Right? And that's what a horse can do. So they're instant biofeedback machines, but they don't judge. There's no judgment. They're just letting you know if your current mental state is making them feel safe or making them feel like there's trouble brewing. Right?
I love it.
So they let us know right away if you are someone that they feel safe around. Right? And what we teach you is that however the horse is interpreting your energy and what's going on with you, that is how it's affecting the other people in your life as well. So we teach you how to develop healthy relationships by controlling your mood, controlling your energy, overcoming these challenges in a way that makes sense to you, that's doable, that's step by step, that's easy, and the horse lets us know how you're doing, right?
So that's, I love that. So I know it's not just me, but I remember, especially after a few years being in the Marine Corps, you know, people would say, hey, you've changed. Wouldn't really, so it would be obvious that, yeah, that kind of lifestyle does change a person because you're immersed in it. The more interesting part was when I would go somewhere with my wife and she would say, hey, are you okay? Because people are thinking that you're like pissed off and upset. And I would be sitting there saying, no, I'm fine. Just tell them I'm fine.
Right.
That piece of information, the idea like that, like I didn't even know that I was giving off like this vibe, because I'm sitting thinking, the world is great, I just don't want to talk to people.
Right.
So interesting, and we've seen this where we could be thinking that everything's okay, and then the horses signal that there's just something off.
Underlying, right?
Yeah.
Underlying stress, underlying anxiety.
Something.
Right,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
so often the client doesn't even realize it. It's not that the client is completely aware that they're feeling anxious or depressed or stressed or fight or flight, or they're in that state of alarm that so many veterans and first responders live in, that state of alarm. But it becomes almost subconscious because they're so used to living with it and dealing with it and pushing it down and you know, forging forward and living with it. They've learned to live with it, but what they don't realize is how much it is affecting their own physical, emotional, social, and psycho health, and affecting the people around them. So what the horse does is it allows you to become more aware. We call it attunement, right? So the horse teaches you to be much more attuned to how are you really feeling, right? Underneath your subconscious. Because the horse picks up on that, even though the person living it may not even realize. So first it's awareness and attunement to how you're feeling and how it's affecting you and how it's affecting others. And that's a key to healing trauma. So we know there's two major components that we work on here to healing trauma. One is healthy relationships, and the other one is attunement to self and others. So if you can start integrating those things into your daily living, because everything we do here in the barn should absolutely translate back to your everyday life. We teach principles of healthy living, right? It's not, of course you're having fun with it because you're also working with the horses, and everything we do when you're learning horsemanship can be applied right back to your personal relationships and your life, because we're teaching principles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can stay here and talk. I mean, we've definitely had conversations about this like over and over, and I think one of the awesome things that Laurie does here when a client comes in is just to even be able to explain the why. So if someone goes to a doctor and they're like, hey, I'm sick, and the first thing the doctor says is, all right, let's run some tests. When they come back and say, okay, you have this, even though you don't like that you have it, you at least know, oh, okay, I'm not going crazy. Like, this is like, somebody knows what I have, and now we can start like this treatment process. When someone comes here and they've been, either they know that they're struggling, because that's interesting, like some people don't know that they're struggling. Either they know that they're struggling, or they just feel off, or whatever it is. And we give them an explanation, or you give them an explanation of, this is what's happening. These behaviors happen because you're in this part of your brain. And now we're going to start doing these actions to try to train and reverse the things that are going on, so that you're not going to experience that anymore, or so that you can experience the other feelings. Yeah, it's awesome.
So to put it in simple terms that hopefully everybody tuning in can understand, so Michael and I take a look at 4 different parts of your brain. There's the lower region called the brainstem, and then there's the next region called your diencephalon, which is responsible for movement, body sensations, and then you have your limbic system, which is where healthy relationships live, and then you have your neocortex. So neocortex is a great goal, right? We want to get to a place where your brain is completely cross-integrating through each of these regions. So often people who've experienced trauma come to us, right, Michael, and say, I can't remember anything anymore. I can't problem solve like I used to. I can't, because your neocortex, where all of those systems live, your ability to problem solve, your ability to remember, that all happens in the neocortex. So if you're all stuck in your brainstem living in fight fight or flight, anxiety, depression, stress, that part of your brain becomes overactive, and you're no longer using the other parts of your brain as much, right? And then the pathways to those parts of the brain actually start to break down, and it becomes more and more difficult to use those parts of the brain. So what we do here is we very systematically start engaging through different exercises that we do, through the work we do with the horses. We start engaging those other parts of your brain so that they become stronger. We are actually rebuilding your neural pathways so that you can move more comfortably and more easily from one part of your brain to the other. So in a nutshell, that's a very simplified explanation, but that is pretty much how and why it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So it was I didn't ask the question, and we already kind of like started going into like the how it works piece. So when people at home start to think, well, you know, how is it that, you know, doing this kind of work is going to change, you know, how is it therapeutic, right? This is the reason why it's therapeutic, because we're actually doing something that changes. The other term is called neuroplasticity, right? The fact that your brain can change, and what we're doing is forming new neural pathways from the inside out, outside in. I don't know which direction. But we're doing the thing on the outside, the behavior on the outside, that's creating these new pathways on the inside, right? And once you have more cross-lateralization and more access to the other aspects of your brain, then you kind of start feeling more like yourself, right? Which is another piece of the puzzle.
Right. So if I could add one more thing that helps to helps the neural pathways work so much more effectively. So if anyone's ever been prescribed a psych medication, right? So we know that psych medications are meant to allow the receptors in your brain, which are these neural pathways, to function more effectively, right? So that, for example, Wellbutrin, we know helps the production and absorption of dopamine, so that you feel more content, you feel happier, and it can really help with that. So what we do is we give you natural ways of increasing those chemicals in your brain, right? So it's been scientifically proven that spending time with horses increases your endorphins, your dopamine, your oxytocin, and your serotonin levels. And those are all levels of chemicals in your brain that when you have suffered from trauma, those levels suffer, and because the neural pathways break down, they're not as effective receptors of those chemicals as they would be in let's just say a healthier brain. So sometimes we can, and we're not anti-medication here, sometimes medications are necessary, but we always want to pursue natural means of stimulating production of those chemicals before we just go right to medications. So we do know that biologically, horses help to stimulate those chemicals. And those chemicals, if you're not familiar with them, they help you feel happiness, joy, fulfillment, contentment. They make you problem solve, love, right? Value, and really everything that's good is what those chemicals help your brain to feel.
Absolutely. Yeah, like a lot of people don't know, obviously they don't study this stuff this way. Like dopamine, people know dopamine is like the feel happy drug, but people don't really understand that dopamine is also the drug that, the hormone, I should say, that comes out that helps people problem solve. Right? That's another, you know, just
higher cognitive function, motivation.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So here's a good question. In terms of like how, so we're talking about how it works. We're talking about like the way that equine therapy can heal, right, and help people become more resilient. What are some of the interventions that someone could expect, you know, when they come to Victory Hill?
Right. So one of the first things we do is teach you strategies and skills that you can use outside the barn. Right. So things you could use anywhere. And most people often tell me, and this is a comment I hear from everybody when they visit, is, wow, it's so peaceful here, right? Just being in nature and just being in a barn, the sights, the smells, of course, the horses, right?
Absolutely.
And we have a lot of other animals here, chickens running around and donkeys and ducks, and all of that really makes people feel happy. You know, so just being around animals, we know that and here comes our little Daisy chicken right now. Animals just make people feel happy, right? So it's very non-judgmental here. We receive everyone with open arms. We're here to help, and we want to make sure that comes across, that we have a huge heart for service here, and we just want to be here to support and help in any way that we can. And I think most people feel that warmth and compassion and empathy when they first walk through the gates.
Awesome.
Right? So that's number one. We want you to feel valued. We want you to know that you're in the right place and you're doing the right thing. Okay? And then we're going to teach you strategies such as meditation, body scanning, proper breathing. You wouldn't believe how much learning to take a proper deep breath can change your psyche, right? We know that.
Absolutely.
So, you know, simple things. We do a lot of sensory grounding, right? We might do that stationary here right outside the barn. We also have a wonderful sensory trail that we walk on because we engage all these different parts of the brain by taking a sensory walk.
That's right,
sometimes that's with a horse, sometimes that's without a horse.
That's right,
So there's all kinds of exercises like that. And it's really important for us to teach you strategies that you can use anywhere, right? Not just when you're here in the barn. And then, of course, we work with the horses, right? So everyone wants to come to learn more about horses and how to work with horses. So we might go out in the field and just be with all the horses out there, study their form of communication. How do they talk to each other? And once you get good at learning what the horses are saying, everybody always loves that, right? They want to know, what are they saying? What are they saying to each other? What are they saying to me? So learning horse communication is always really fascinating and fun. And that helps you learn better communication. So we talk about always how that can relate back to you and your forms of communication with other people. And then you'll just learn a lot about horses, a lot about their bio, psycho, social, spiritual needs also, which are so similar to ours. We really like you to form a special bond with one particular horse, because that helps you really feel that sense of value and to feel what a good, healthy relationship feels like, because especially post-COVID, so many people have forgotten what it feels like to have fulfilling, healthy relationships and learning how to form those relationships. Because especially someone who's experienced trauma, they're always in a state of fight or flight and survival. So they lose the nuances and the skill of considering others and others' needs and how to ask to have their own needs met. Right? There's so many different components to having healthy relationships. So by teaching you how to form a really nice bond with one of the horses, and you get to choose whichever one you want to work with, it really fosters those skills, and it's great. And then you'll learn things that help with that bonding process, like grooming, leading through obstacle courses, which is a big exercise in trust. Right? Teaching a horse to walk over a tarp, teaching a horse to overcome things that are scary for them. So that helps you learn mood regulation and helps you learn problem solving, right? My horse is terrified of this hula hoop. How do I get them past this? We've been working on that. So there's so many different things. It's endless. But we try to make it as it's all interactive, right? And that's one of the beautiful things about working with the horses is someone can sit in a clinical setting and you can talk to them all at once. You or so another therapist on your team can talk to them all about, well, I want you to try this and I want you to try that. And when you go home and this situation arises, this is what I want you to think about. But they don't really get to practice it often right there in the office in a real setting and get any feedback on that. What the horses allow the client to do is to practice right here, live, right now, practice the skill, and then the horse is going to let us know how we're doing. So that biofeedback machine. So what that does is it teaches you the muscle memory and allows you to practice that skill in a very non-threatening environment. You know, if you're learning how to control anger and you're home with your spouse or children or whomever, and you start to boil,
right.
it's really hard to remember
right.
what your therapist said. How do I control this? Because it's just boiling, right?
Right.
So it's a little more difficult to develop the skill, because in that moment you have to remember, what was I supposed to do? And
right.
you know, so but here you get to practice it. You get to practice it on the horses and really learn how to develop that skill.
Yeah. So we call that state-dependent learning. So in whatever state you're in. So if you actually came to my office and you were angry, then we can do something to kind of work through that. But if you just come to my office and say, I get angry a lot, you know, and when you're sitting in front of me, you're not really pissed off. Now it's like, okay, so this is what we want to do when we get angry.
Right.
But if you're not in that mood or in that moment, like you're saying, you're not going to get the instant feedback, right? You're not going to be able to regulate in the moment, because you got to wait until, you know, I guess you get upset, right?
Right.
All great stuff. Again, we can stay here for a really long time. I love, and I want to kind of do a little bit more of a deeper dive in like, I want to talk about the Horses for Heroes program a little bit more, just to just kind of bring awareness that this is another approach for people that may still have something about going to a therapy office, right? And, you know, being able to do this as a therapeutic approach, whether it's whether traditional therapy is an adjunct to what you're doing, or just doing this as the therapeutic approach.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit more about the Horses for Heroes program?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it does really help to overcome that stigma of getting mental health support, right? Because unfortunately, especially in law enforcement, they fear having to surrender their weapon, they fear having to surrender their shield, and they just worry, right?
Yep.
So first of all, everything that happens here is 100% confidential.
Yeah.
Nobody ever needs to know that you're coming here,
right?
Okay, and you can just say, hey, you're going to volunteer, you're going to help with the horses, right? Because we do have a wonderful volunteer program also. So if you would like to come and be in this environment and help with horses, but you're not sure about actually enrolling in the program, consider volunteering.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're pretty emotionally stable. But it's a great way to get a look at what we do here without, you know, being fully committed to the program, right? And by the way, there's no such thing as fully committed. You come, we have active military that are constantly, you know, they're reservists, so they're being deployed constantly and having to go to their trainings, and we've got, you know, active military members who are traveling quite a bit, so they come when they can. You know, they come when they can, and it really gets them their fix. So I'll give you an example. One of my clients is FDNY, okay, fireman. So of course his job is extremely stressful. He's constantly living in fight or flight. He works in Brooklyn, one of the most active houses in any of the boroughs. Just that alarm goes off every time they pull back in the garage, the alarm goes off again, if they're not going from call to call to call, right? So there is no downtime. There is no time to de-stress. There's no time to, you know, it's just an incredibly stressful occupation, is particularly in that house. He has young children and a wife, and he constantly fears, what if something happens to me? What will happen to them? So there's a lot that he deals with on a regular basis. So, and his wife and I will have conversations once in a while, and she'll say he really needs to come there this week because she sees the change in him. Absolutely. She sees the change when he can take that time to just breathe, right? And de-stress and stop the head spinning, stop the constant worry, stop living in that constant state of alarm, literally. And just taking that 1 hour break a week where he gets to be with his horse and not think about all that other stuff. Because I'll tell you something, when you're working with a 1,200-pound animal, you learn to be in the moment.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's something most of our clients have in common, is an inability to live in the moment. because they're always, I think it's such human nature, especially in today's world, the rat race, you know, even if you're, you know, just have a 9-to-5 job, which we know these days is 8 to 6, right?
Right.
So you're working 8 to 6 or longer, and, you know, you get home, it's, you know, dinner, kids, baths, feed time, get up next morning and do it all over again.
Right.
And there's no time to de-stress and decompress and relax and just check in with yourself.
Right.
Right. So that's what the hour here allows you to do. And it constantly amazes me how just setting aside that 1 hour a week to be with just you and your horse can change your perspective.
Yeah, there's a great statistic that you share quite often about how equine therapy helped veterans from Vietnam.
Yep.
You want to share that with us?
Sure. So there's a wonderful study done. There's several really good studies out there, but this particular one I tend to quote a lot. It's through the University of Missouri, through their Columbia School of Nursing. Several years ago, they did a study with I don't remember the exact number, but a couple dozen veterans who all had quite high PTSD scores.
Right.
They all had significant challenges due to Vietnam.
Right.
Okay. Which means, think about that. They had been suffering with PTSD challenges for 40 or 50 years, right? So they enrolled them in just a 10-week equine assisted services program. I believe it was equine assisted learning. It was not even the psychotherapy. And basically the program consisted of them spending time with their horse, grooming and leading, learning to tack their horse, meaning put on the riding gear,
yep.
And then riding for, 20, 30 minutes once a week. Okay, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. They didn't even address any of this biopsycho psycho stuff that you and I like to talk about. They didn't even address any of that. It was just spending time with their horse. And what they found was the study revealed in just the first 3 weeks, this is amazing, 3 weeks, so 3 hours, that's it, of spending time with their horses, they had a 67% reduction in their PTSD scores. After 6 weeks, they had an 87% reduction.
Right.
That is absolutely phenomenal. You don't see results like that with any other modality. It's just, it's amazing. Right. And I can tell you that we see very similar, we haven't done a formal study here. You've done some of your own analysis.
I definitely have assessments to prove exactly that.
Yeah.
We do work with, obviously, veterans and first responders. And this is the first time, so I really enjoyed this modality, and I really appreciate that Laurie gave me the opportunity to be a part of Victory Hill in this capacity. I knew what the study said, but I've never experienced it. And we have been working with a specific client, and this person was pretty severe. I want to say that 6 months in, he allowed us to do another assessment, and he had an 87% positive treatment outcome. 87%.
Right.
So, I mean, it was really, really an interesting, eye-opening event for me personally to witness that. Right. Obviously, Laurie, you've been seeing that and the success of this work for many years. But it was really eye-opening for me to see that.
To witness it.
It was really great.
Right.
In my office, I usually try to create holistic treatment approaches, and I'll talk about biopsychosocial spiritual perspectives, and I'll say something like, we want to be able to create or have something in our treatment plan to address each of these areas. So when I talk about a bio perspective, I say, hey, I need you to, we need to talk about eating well, sleeping well, and getting 30 minutes of active activity. When I talk about, psychological and it's like mental and emotional, can we learn something? Can we do something that's going like meditative practices and things of this nature to help ease, the emotional system and increase the learning and mental capacity, right? Social health is
I don't know if everybody can hear that, but that's Dixie, our donkey, who loves Michael. She knows you're here.
Oh, I love it. Okay. That's definitely staying. That's definitely staying in the video.
Hopefully we can hear it.
So social health is, again, just being in community, being with family members, better relationships. And then spiritual health is not necessarily about religion. It's basically about honoring your own values. So we define what those values are, and then we do things that are going to put you in line with the things that you say that you value. Mm-hmm. What does that look like when we're doing this kind of work? Okay,
thank God Michael gave me a heads up that he was going to ask me this question because I took some notes because I had to take, there's such a giant list of benefits.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Huge, comprehensive, giant list of benefits that equine assisted services offer. So when Michael posed this question to me, I had to really think about what category each of these benefits might fall in. So forgive me, but I have some notes.
It's all good, yeah.
So when we look at the bio piece, okay, so our physical well-being, the most obvious is you're outside and you're in fresh air and you're out in nature. We all know that not only is a biological benefit, but also a psychological benefit. Right. Exercise and movement, okay? And by the way, I just want anyone watching to know that we are a therapeutic horsemanship program. So even if you have significant physical disabilities, we make adaptations so you can still participate in this work.
Awesome.
Okay, so even if you're in a wheelchair, if you walk with a cane or a walker, if you are a paraplegic, if you are a TBI victim, whatever your physical challenges are, it's our job to make physical adaptations to allow you to still do this work in some capacity.
Awesome.
Strengthening and balance and coordination. Body awareness, and that ties in again to this cycle piece also, just being aware of your body. So many people are not aware that they hold tension in their body, whether it's in your shoulders, your neck. People wonder why they've got back pain. They've got, and it's, so core strengthening, being aware that that's where you're holding tension in your body. So as we learn to conquer the stress and tension, we might see some of these physical ailments repair as well. We talked about the increase in production of the happy chemicals, right? So dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin. So that is a biological change that occurs when we're spending time with horses. And the other thing is, the other chemical that gets adjusted is cortisol. We know that cortisol is the stress hormone, right? So when you're harboring all kinds of stress, we absolutely know that causes a physical havoc on your body.
That's right,
all kinds of medical issues come from high cortisol levels. So we teach you how to reduce, naturally through what we're doing and working on with you to reduce your cortisol levels.
Nice.
So it does give you an overall healthier physical state.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is great.
Awesome.
And then psycho, right? That's probably our favorite one. So just managing stress, anxiety, and depression, just learning how to manage those mental health challenges.
Right.
And then recovering from the changes that are caused in the brain, but from PTSD, early childhood trauma, anxiety, depression, etc. Learning how to regulate mood swings and identify them. So learning how to identify when you feel this mood change coming on, and then how to regulate it.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's always, I always have to be mindful that most people don't realize, these emotions sneak up on you and you just don't even realize that they're coming until it's too late, until the floodgates have opened.
It's true. Yeah.
And the damage is done, right? Then, so we teach you how to recognize what your triggers are and how to recognize that it's coming. Yes. So what can we do about it? I always say, learn to anticipate the problem and solve it before it becomes a bigger problem, because once the problem occurs, it's much more difficult to repair. Right. Improving cognitive function and memory. That is one of my big benefits from working with the horses and being an executive director of a very busy organization is it really helps me with my memory
absolutely.
and cognitive function for sure. and again, I repeated this in the psycho column, the increase in those happy chemicals, right?
Yep.
And the reduction of cortisol levels. And I think another super important one, and this is learning to be present in the moment. I mentioned that earlier, right? It's so key to our happiness,
right?
Because if we're constantly thinking about, you know, what if this happens and what if that happens and I got to do this later, and you're constantly like mentally reviewing your to-do list, and you're constantly worried about, you know, everything that's churning in your mind.
Right.
If you are hypervigilant, meaning you're hyper aware of your surroundings, maybe you've been trained as a combat vet, and you know you're constantly waiting for something to jump out of the bushes. You're constantly waiting for that mortar to go off. You're constantly waiting. You know, you are just constantly living in a state of alarm. Right. It is really difficult to turn that off without learning the skills that you need to be present in the moment. Right. And I mentioned earlier, when you're working with us, so one of the things we teach you, I love to teach lunging, right? Lunging and even leading a horse. You're working in close proximity to a 1,200-pound animal.
Yes.
Okay. And there is nothing separating you and that animal, right?
Nope.
And when we lunge, we're in a round pen. You're in a 55-foot round pen, just you and the horse. Okay. And I'll be in there to keep you safe. But it's pretty much just you and the horse. And you're asking this horse to walk around you in a circle, trot around you in a circle, canter or gallop around you in a circle. And boy, is it empowering when you realize that you can, through very simple body movements or vocal instruction, communicate with this horse which movement you would like them to have.
Right.
Okay. But imagine standing in the middle of this round pen, and this horse is galloping full speed, only halfway, right? So it'd be about 25 feet from you. Okay, around you in a circle. It's very, very empowering. And you need to be present. Absolutely. You need to pay attention.
Absolutely.
Right? So, you don't even end up thinking about the fact that you're being present. You just, almost for survival, right? I better be present and in this moment and be paying attention to what's happening to me right now. And what's happening around me with both me and my horse. Right. So that's a great exercise for learning to be in the moment. And also, even if it's just approaching the horse in the field, that horse will not allow you to approach it if you are not in the moment. If you are not here and mentally present, and you go to approach me, I am just going to walk away from you because I don't feel safe that you're not present and aware of me and my environment. Right. So the horses teach you to be in the moment. It's such an important skill to learn. And socially, right? Learn how to achieve and maintain healthy relationships. Horses are experts at healthy relationships. They live in a herd environment, right? They want to connect. They want to connect with you. They want to connect with each other, but only if it feels safe. Right? So learning to set appropriate boundaries, right? Especially if we've had, with Horses for Heroes, sometimes we see victims of military sexual trauma, both men and women. Right? So they really suffer from not worrying about setting boundaries, or their ability to set boundaries has been compromised, you know. So we help them build their confidence back up and learn how to set appropriate boundaries. Sometimes they, out of necessity, way overdo it with boundaries, right? And they keep everybody away from them, they don't allow anyone to get physically, mentally, or emotionally close to them, and it's just all their boundaries are inappropriate, right? Just keep everybody away. Through their behavior or whatever. So we, you know, again, learning to set appropriate boundaries. Improve your communication, both verbal and nonverbal. Okay, because everything we do affects the people around us, right? When you mentioned that Christine was telling you were making a mean face, right? You were intimidating people. My husband does the same thing. Intimidating people just by looking angry, being unapproachable. Right, and you didn't realize it until she pointed it out. Right. So that's nonverbal communication, and then communicating so that a very important skill we teach here is called degrees of request. Right. So having your needs met. How do you communicate what your needs are to someone else? Maybe it's a partner or your children. or your spouse, whoever it is, a friend, we all have needs. We all have certain needs that need to be met, right? And we're not really happy unless our needs are being met. And that could be just, you know what, I have a need for laughter, and you're a killjoy. You're really not making me laugh, okay? I need you to make me laugh. Or it could be like, hey, I just want to go out. I need to go out to movies, a concert, dinner, something, right? Every married couple has a need for a date night, right? And that feeling of emotional intimacy.
Yes.
So how do you communicate that in a way that's not, I can't believe you haven't taken me out to dinner. It's been like a month. Right. And the guilt trip and the going right to, that's inappropriate.
Right.
How's that going to help your relationship? So we learn, how do you communicate your needs so that it's healthy in the relationship? It's building the relationship up. So we practice that with horses because it's the same principle in horse training. Right. I really love how those things align.
Absolutely.
Learn how your energy affects those around you, right? Because there's one thing for sure, it's very scientific that our energy and the horse's energy meet in the field, right? And so how is our energy affecting the horse and vice versa?
Right.
And we know that the horse's energy is always completely congruent and usually pretty not always peaceful, but usually pretty peaceful. And it affects us in positive ways. So we want to return that favor to our horse. But learning how your energy affects those around you is super important.
Absolutely.
Often somebody who suffers from trauma is not a lot of fun to be around, right? They just can be very, very angry or very despondent, very dissociated and closed off, which makes them hard to relate to. One of the best examples I like to give is, we just have, we'll call him Jack, right? Jack walks into the hardware store and the cashier rings up the box of nails he's buying for the wrong price. Okay, he feels that he's been slighted, right? So he goes from 0 to 60, chews out that cashier, right? And she's like completely shaken up. Maybe she has to cry, maybe she has to go get her manager, but you just ruined her whole day instead of just giving her the opportunity to fix
the problem,
right? So, we teach you how not to go from 0 to 60, but how to communicate your needs to someone in a healthy way so that everybody walks away feeling pretty okay with whatever it was and feeling good about things. Okay, so learning the importance of being congruent, right? So that your outside matches your inside, right? Because were you saying that even though you were making a grouchy face, you really didn't feel grouchy?
I didn't feel grouchy.
Right, so your outside was not matching your inside, right? So again, that's body awareness, being aware that congruency is a thing that we need to pay attention to,
Absolutely.
Right? How often we feel pretty happy inside, but we're just don't smile,
right?
So yeah, it's important for people to understand how to relate to you and for the energy that you're giving off, that we learn how to be congruent. And then spiritual, right? So increasing your confidence and sense of self-worth.
Yes.
Okay, so that is something that is really easy to accomplish here through our horses, because boy, does it feel good when you learn how to communicate with, and you feel that connection. We teach you to feel this healthy connection with your horse. So understanding when that moment of connection happens, it's awesome. Identifying your value system. So what are your values?
Right.
How can we make changes in your life so that you are better aligning your daily activities with your value system? Right? Things like that. Increasing your sense of purpose, because we give you a job here, right? I want you to teach the horse. So we've been working with one of our clients on helping one of our horses to get over her fear of hula hoops. She's terrified of hula hoops. Right? So and why a hula hoop, right? Because we use them in our therapeutic class. So I really need her to get over her fear of hula hoops. When you move it, it sounds like a rattlesnake. That sets her off. So we've been working, so his job is to get the horse over her fear of hula hoops, and we keep working on it week after week after week. And he's already helped her overcome her fear of walking on a tarp. And, so we are training our horses. You have the purpose here of training the horses and helping them in many, many ways. They're not only helping you, but you're helping them. So you get this wonderful sense of purpose and accomplishment when you see the horse achieve what it is you set out to achieve with them. And it's awesome. We all always want to cry. Yay! We did it.
Absolutely.
And then just an increased sense of joy and gratitude and hope. Right? A lot of people come here, it's their last stop.
Right.
You know, they didn't think of equine assisted services until somebody said, I've tried everything else,
Right.
nothing is working. Somebody says, hey, I've heard about Victory Hill, I've heard about equine assisted services, give it a try. So unfortunately for some people, this is their last stop. And we just renew and give them that whole new sense of hope and enjoyment through all of the things we've already talked about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, everything, if I kind of say, since I've been here, I actually love coming here. If I kind of even say this for my own therapeutic,
Every therapist needs a therapist.
Right. So like this is kind of like my therapy coming in here, and all of the things that Laurie just explained is absolutely. I've seen this with my own eyes. It is a wonderful, wonderful experience. Speaking not as a therapist, but as a first responder or a veteran, because I am both. I really see the impact that it has, and it really just makes you a better person, I think, right?
Yeah.
And that's huge. So again, we can stay here and continue to break this down, but we do have to kind of close, but not before you let everybody know like how to get a hold of you, like where can they find you on social media and all that other good stuff.
Right. So first, I guess, would be our website.
Yep.
So it's just Victory Hill, and then T as in therapeutic, H as in horsemanship.org.
Nice.
So victoryhillth.org. You can find us on the web, and it does give a breakdown of all of our programs there. There's some of our registration forms are there, different things we have going on, like our summer camp and our fundraisers, and we are a 501c3.
Yep.
So we do heavily rely on our very generous donors and grantors to keep our doors open. And then we do have Facebook. We post regularly, if not every day, very regularly on our Facebook page. We'll post different videos and explanations of different things we're doing. It's a great place to get an inside look at what's happening and see our work with different clients and how we're doing things. That's our Facebook page. So if you just search on Facebook for Victory Hill Therapeutic Horsemanship, it should populate and come right up. And then we do have an Instagram page, but I confess, I'm much more of a Facebook person than Instagram. I do have a staff member who's supposed to be working on Instagram, but we're extremely busy here, so it's hard to find the time. But we are on Instagram also under Victory Hill TH. Yeah.
Outstanding.
So, and of course, email. You can always email me. You'll find that information on the website, but it is Laurie, Laurie, at victoryhillth.org. And feel free to send me an email anytime.
Yeah, and guys, obviously all of this stuff is going to be in the description down below. There's also going to be a link if you guys want to donate to Victory Hill. We're going to have links for you to be able to go directly to her donation page. And if you guys have any questions for Laurie, as usual, if you have any questions for myself, if this content was helpful, please share, like, and subscribe. Leave your comments in the comment section down below, and we'll be able to come back and maybe even answer those questions through another live video session. But thank you so much. This has been an absolutely wonderful pleasure for me. I want to thank you personally for just allowing me to be part of this experience, because it's just great. I just really enjoyed it.
Thank you for being a very valuable team member. I was searching high and low for just the right clinician when Michael came along and answered my prayers. So thank you.
And thank you again, guys. We will catch you guys on the next one. Take care.